I don't come from a very technical background. I'm not an engineer, so I can't talk about a lot of the hardware constraints, the software constraints, how do you code, and I'm assuming that's not the intent of this. I do come from a practitioner viewpoint, which is how do you identify problems to solve with AI? Because a lot of time what happens is that we get carried away by the latest technology, and then it becomes a matter of taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Right? So I'll probably end with an anecdote, but to start with, a couple of slides and generative AI, because these are the two phrases that everyone talks about. My talk is called ubiquitous AI, because a lot of times the best technology usage is where one cannot spot it. Right? When Netflix throws your recommendation, you know there's AI working behind the scenes because it's a case study. Everybody talks about it. Right? How does Amazon know what you're likely to buy next? There's an algorithm running behind it. But those are all the known use cases. There is several use cases in our daily world, and because the audience, I didn't get a sense of who was there, so I tried to use very out of the world but relatable examples to talk about it. Let's go. So very simply put, I think which is human intelligence and machines programmed to think and learn like humans. That's when a machine can do what a human can, that is being artificially intelligent. Let's just move on. Generative AI is a subset, which is right. Literally speaking, generative AI started coming into the media only because of ChatGPT. It's been around, but it gained prominence because of ChatGPT. And it is basically the next realm where it's generating content. Currently, I do not know of any high-end rollout of generative AI which has actually made it big. There are small ones. Chatbots have started using generative AI. There are a lot of pilots in place. So I'm not going to touch upon a lot of this except for how do you identify opportunities within a space to implement generative AI. I'm not going to talk about here's a definitive use case, no. And my entire talk is around how do you identify problems for AI to solve. So I'll start with a very different topic, which is bird watching. It's a pet hobby of mine. My entire family is into it. There is an app called Merlin. Anybody here into wildlife at all? Great, so I can say anything and get away with it. Brilliant. So this was shot about 10 days ago when I was in Africa. The picture on the left, we didn't know what that bird was. It was literally a split second. See the bird, take a shot, and that was a terrible shot. And then you want to resolve it, to say what bird did I see. There's an app that Cornell University developed 3 years ago, by the way. This is not new. AI has been there. It's embedded in this app. It works offline. Beautiful app. It then tells me what that bird was using such a terrible picture. So this was one of the earliest examples that I knew before, in terms of how AI had I'd been using this. I had never put too much thought into it. I'm like, yeah, Merlin is a go-to app for anybody. It solved a lot of problems. This is a very good example of why this problem was chosen, why AI was chosen for this problem. One, people who are photographers love to show off their pictures. A lot of photos exist on the internet which are already tagged. This is a picture of this bird. So the data existed for this app to work. A bird watcher does not want to carry a huge book into the field. You're already carrying binoculars, you're already carrying cameras. You don't want to carry a huge book also. And we used to do that. I mean, I've been into birding for about 15 years now. Right? And today I don't carry any equipment for identifying the bird except this. So this code has to run on your smartphone. So what it does is, across the world, like all 4 continents, birds have been uploaded, millions of images, and it learned that any photo that I upload, with a certain degree of accuracy, there are also times it fails miserably, but most times a good picture will give you a definite result. And there are, the number of species of birds are mind-boggling. So it's not possible for all of us to learn everything, right? So this is an example where if you have access to a large amount of data, you have a problem to solve. The problem solved was you have a clear set of audience, you know who's going to use it. The problem is you want to solve for no book, you want a handheld app, and instant gratification. I don't have to go back into my room and sit and browse through a bunch of pages to do this. So this is a very good example of how image-related recognition and AI work hand in hand. I call it ubiquitous because nobody really thinks that there's AI behind the scenes. It's just solving a problem for me, and that's it. Applications like these, abstract this out. There are companies which currently use photos of leaves, for example, in agro industry to detect what disease has hit that crop. Because you've had enough people go take photos of various leaves to say, if the leaf of this crop looks like this is the infection it is going through. So there's enough data. If you have enough data for a particular region, you can actually build something. And these are all existing applications. Similarly, looking at flooding patterns of satellite images to figure out risk of what is the most likely flood risk, for example, right? These are all image-related problems. So the takeaway for me from this is, if you have enough labeled data, because somebody did the hard work, they used community source data. They did not pay any money to get the data organized. They just picked off the data from the internet, and it worked. The second is a problem I personally worked on in my last fintech. So this is something that a lot of us have access to. If you go into your IDFC First Bank or your HDFC or any of your banks today, ICICI included, you will see that your transaction is pre-categorized on your net banking account. It will basically look at your big basket transaction, it will say groceries. You will not think twice. There are times, again, all AI models have a degree of accuracy. 80-90% is brilliant if you can get it. Here is a problem where every bank represents a transaction in a different way. So the same big basket transaction swiped with a debit card, an Axis Bank debit card, will turn up in a different syntax, in a different way in your Axis Bank statement. It will turn up differently in your HDFC Bank statement. But ultimately, this is a natural language problem. There's English. And maybe because the way HDFC Bank is configured, it will turn up as BB. Something else will turn up as BIGBSKT. Basically understanding that both are big basket, and big basket therefore is grocery. And imagine running this across millions of merchants, maybe 30-40 categories. And then actually, eventually, what is the outcome? You just need to know how much did you spend where. Maybe eventually make a budget. Again, this is actually an AI model at work in the background. What it's doing is reading the English, understanding it, extracting a merchant, mapping the merchant to a category, and telling you that. Again, apply this in business, any place where you have language, which is probably variability in language. And that can be resolved. ChatGPT is a large language model. That's the core of it, right? We built, I think we took 3 years to build this model 3 years ago. ChatGPT took 2 hours to answer the same question when it came out. So there are pre-built models. How is this getting used today? Anybody who uses Zoho, FreshBooks, all of these softwares, Zoho has already incorporated this. So you're probably already using some of these AI use cases, but how does that apply to your business? Is there any place where you have to deal with this kind of variable languages and you have to standardize the output? You can pretty much get a decent developer to understand what algorithms from ChatGPT need to be picked up and solve for the problem. The problem there, the way you define it is, do I have variability issues in my language and do I need a standardized output? Could be PO data, for example. If you're in audit, I come from an old audit world where we used to struggle with this, trying to understand what the PO says, because it'll have all abbreviations in the purchase order. Today, you can easily solve for that. Almost all new age machines come with sensors. IoT is like, whether people use the data or not, there's a lot of data getting generated. The question is, can you use that data to figure out preventive maintenance? It's called now predictive maintenance. It's gone from preventive to predictive. When I used to be on shop floors earlier, I remember every 3 months, one large machine would go offline because you have to get it serviced, schedule here, you have to adhere to it. Today, you now have enough symptoms and data being transmitted based on which you can actually take a call when the maintenance needs to happen. And that's all in the background. There's an algo running on this. Again, Sir spoke about a lot of this, but I want to just talk about the generative AI piece. If anyone's noticed, the interaction with your airlines has improved significantly in the last 6 months. Be it Indigo, be it Air India Express, they have this chatbot on WhatsApp, which suddenly seems to be very friendly with you, which it never was before. That's pretty much because they've integrated some degree of generative AI behind, which is why it feels like there's somebody talking to you, right? So they've done a good job there. That's the simplest and the easiest use case for generative AI, where it is able to understand your input in any format that you're giving in. Earlier it used to be structured. It'll say choose one of these. Then you go into the next step. Here, if I actually write a free text query, it's able to respond to me. I say, I want to check in my PNR with this thing. It'll just pick out the relevant information, generate a link and send it back to me saying, click this link for you to check it. Now, how does this get applied? Now, let's imagine in a business-to-business scenario, whether you're in real estate, whether you're in retail, which is more B2C, but let's say in a business-to-business scenario where you're making some product which has huge instruction manuals that one has to follow, or a FAQ document which is vast. If you're able to stick a chatbot on top of it, which therefore enables your customer to query that document in a very friendly way. I use this all the time myself. When I don't understand something and there's a 50-page manual I need to go through, be it for my dishwasher or anything, I upload it to ChatGPT now and ask a question. How do I solve for this problem? It does a beautiful job. It will just query that document, find my answer and send it to me. I no longer need to do Control F, search for one keyword. It's able to understand my question. Now imagine that application at any level of a business-to-business kind of a scenario. Take it in retail. If I'm able to walk into a jewelry store and I'm able to describe my ask. I want a choker necklace which has floral patterns. If that can be taken as an input, and the top 10 designs that match my free text input, I'm able to get a response. There is generative in there somewhere because it's able to understand that and then match it to the parameterized version of all my inventory as a jeweler. As a designer, and that's what I think we do with a Gamma.app or a PPT designer as well, right? Any kind of a design thing. I'm not saying the final design will probably be 100% different from what the AI gave you, but that 40% work of inertia, right? When you start something, you're always on that inertia mode. It takes away that inertia. 40% of your work is done because it's always easy to improve upon a design than to start a design. And that's what I think generative AI does very well. This was a very interesting use case actually that I came across where there is Atomwise. There's an organization called Atomwise in the US. They've apparently successfully piloted generative AI in drug discovery. Which again, they're not saying they'll do the entire end-to-end chain, but their main thing was in molecular design and basically molecular design. What they did was, the ingredients go into drug development, right? There are 10, 20 ingredients to every tablet or whatever we call it, a generic, right? So, and every one of them have certain parameters, they have certain effects, there is a certain reason that you introduce a certain drug ingredient. Combinations earlier would have been either physically tried out or people would have individually tried and said, okay, let me put 200 mg of this, XX amount of this, and let me see what comes out. So I think that part they've done a very, very smart job of crunching the development time. Apparently, the drug discovery cycle has come down to less than a year, which used to be like 7-8 years earlier. Because the number of permutations and combinations this generates and also tells you this combination may be dangerous. This combination is going to likely not work out, or this combination is infeasible. Right? So I think they've done a good job. In health, sort of spoke about it, but there's brilliant application in healthcare. Especially in a country like India. I'm talking to a couple of healthcare organizations as we speak, more informally to understand what they're doing. The biggest challenge is primary healthcare in this country. It is not about access to surgeons and this and that. It's just the first level of saying in a rural area, there are not great doctors don't want to go work in a second tier, third tier city or in a rural area. So there are a couple of large scale hospitals which are trying to see what can I do to solve that problem. And their answer comes back to this. Can I basically take the symptoms that these guys are giving me, understand their background? Also, this is very important. Context becomes important. If a person who's working in a tobacco industry comes and complains of coughing versus somebody who's like you and me goes and complains of coughing, there's context. You'll be probably more worried about the tobacco guy because it could be much more dangerous than you and I coughing or a smoker coughing versus all of that, right? But the ability to actually learn from past diagnosis, wherever it has happened, and apply it onto this kind of situation, there's actually the biggest impact I believe AI will have is in the social sector, if used right. There's not much money there, but if used right, that is where there is. But again, the question here is if you have a lot of combinations to work with, applying it to any industry, if you've got a product catalog which is over a period of time built up a lot, And today you need to say, okay, what subset of that product catalog will appeal to this customer? You could potentially use AI to do that. I mean, it's a very abstract version of what I'm talking about, but I'm sticking to examples which are generic and then trying to make it more specific. Right? So I think that's the other part. So 5-6 things on identifying opportunities whenever you look at where can AI help. One is if there's any data intensive process, because data is the new oil and you need data for a AI model to learn from. Repetitive tasks. I think I'm pretty much summarizing Sir's presentation to a great extent. Visual inspection. I'll actually end with this one on visual inspection and the whole story about why it's important to know which problem to solve and which problem not to solve. But large knowledge bases accumulated over time. This is one of the biggest things that organizations, small, medium, large, face. Any product company, whatever you're building, you would have built one manual sitting there in digitized form. How do you even handle that? I mean, how do you make interaction of your customer easy with that? That's actually one of the easiest problems to solve today with LLMs, large language models. Customer interaction points, anywhere where there's a customer interaction point, can I make it seamless? And I think you see it, almost every website today has a 24/7 bot. But can I make that bot be much more intelligent than when you can buy a bot today? It'll just say, hello, I'll get back to you. But if you train that bot on your manuals, if I am a real estate buyer and I log into a website, if I can tell the bot what I'm looking for and can list the top 10 properties, I'm cutting a little bit of the sales cycle also, right? Personalization, extremely important. Any place where you want your customer to have a personalized experience, can be on your website, can be when you walk into a store. You're able to just say, okay, why don't you tell me what you want and I will try and help you with what fits best for you. That's also AI. To end, I'll just go back to that example I wanted to talk about, and it might be a known story. There's a story that one of these Alpenliebe or Mentos kind of, those candy makers, they had this problem of the candy being missing from a lot. You'd have 100 candies and 10 would have nothing in it. So a lot of customer dissatisfaction got reported. And 10 factories, they went to the German manufacturer of the machines and they came back with fabulous tweaks to the machine and nothing happened. It still continued to have 10% empty wrappers going out. And the story is that there was one factory which was reporting 100% quality. One factory. So they went and studied, and they couldn't figure out very obviously. At the end, somebody said this is the part where I can see that this is the last place where the candy is coming out of the line, the packaged candy. Let's see what is happening there. So there was a factory worker who had just kept a standing fan. And what it would do is, he had figured out the right speed at which it needs to run. And it would blow away the empty wrappers. And this supposedly, I checked with somebody who worked with Perfetti at that time. They say it is a true story. That Perfetti actually had this problem and they went to the German manufacturer of machines. That guy came back and gave an upgrade where they spent millions of dollars, but the solution was this guy. He just put a fan. So it's important to know when to actually, what problem you need to tackle with what technology. There you go. At the end of the day, you need human intelligence. And sometimes that trumps everything, right? But my point I think I'm making is, don't go after AI just because it's a shiny new thing. Find the right problem to solve. Yeah, thank you.